I can. I've just got a bit of an issue going on at the same time, so I'll be here when I can. Sorry.
Don't worry. Just to let you know that we've decided to record this session, so I hope that's okay with you as well, Helen. Just so that people that can't join today, they can listen to the messages, because I think everybody's just so busy. Always sort of tune in live as such. So
I might have to rush out as well at one point, so that's brilliant.
That's okay. You can pick this up afterwards. Okay, we'll give it one more minute and then I think we'll start. And then what we'll do, because Alison's not here, Jim, we'll just do your 2 messages if that's all right.
Yep, no problem.
Just while I've got you, Jim, though, and Lisa, when do you think we'll hear back about our portfolios?
I was just having a similar chat to Zoe, actually. She didn't ask when, but they're all marked. We went to moderation this week, so it really shouldn't be very long. I would say within the next week, but Vicky will give you a definite date, so you can always check with Vicky. But as far as I'm concerned, all marked and moderated. I don't know if they've got to go through the external examiner. That's the only thing they might have to go through, and I don't know when the date for that is. So you might be best just to double check with Vicky.
Yeah, we've had our marks for our module 2 sort of action research, but they've obviously still got to go through the moderator. So I would imagine if we email her, she'll share those results then, won't she?
Yeah, she will, and she can give you a definite date on your portfolios and when that will be.
Yeah, I'll do that while we're waiting then.
Okay. Right, I think we should just start. Seeing we're recording as well, we will make a start. So are you okay, Jim, to do your 2 agenda items? So it's up to you which way around you want to do them. I had alternative provision framework first. You're on mute at the moment, Jim.
Okay, so I should be not on mute now, hopefully. Just for those people who have joined us today and those who are listening to this as recorded, just to extend a thanks to those of you who got the questionnaire, the lockdown questionnaire that we looked at prior to the summer break out to families. I've sent round a summary of the feedback. We had 272 responses, which was a fantastic response. And those schools who had 10 responses or more, we have provided you with your individual anonymized feedback. And I think that the usefulness of that was that if it gave you a bit of a flavour of what families were saying, but also there were some lovely comments in there. So even if just for, I think without exception, all schools had some really fantastic comments. So even as a morale booster, I think it was worthwhile. But I also wanted to sort of give a bit of background to the questionnaire. It was written by our parent carer forum, so that's Claire and Tara, who I know that you know. So it is worth bearing in mind that it is by parents for parents, and I think one thing that we learned through that is quite often is that we asked a lot of open questions, so that made getting quantitative data quite difficult, but we did end up with quite a lot of qualitative data, which you would have seen if you've looked at the summary of the responses. And in that sense, the numbers don't necessarily always add up because people answer questions in different ways and they're harder to quantify. What I think in terms of things to take away is that the issues facing families of primary aged pupils and secondary aged pupils are different, and I think that comes as a clear theme through the summary. And I think what else I really took away from it was that families probably received a really good service, but not all families recognised that they received a really good service. So, for example, I could see contradictions between the questions. So if you asked a question to a family, which did you receive feedback, they'd answer yes, or if they answered no, sorry. In the next question, it would be, did you have contact from your child's teacher? They'd say yes. So if I was to say anything to schools, it would be next time pupils are sent home because a bubble is shut or something like that, I would encourage you to send home an FAQ document around what families can expect. And a good examples of questions that I would put in there, looking at the feedback that we receive from families, is what will feedback look like? So, for example, families didn't always necessarily recognise that a comment on Google Classroom was good quality feedback. I would define what contact will be like. What will that look like? Who will be contacting you and when? And also, I would put in something like, it would be really helpful if. So, you know, how do you need families to interact with you? What information do you need from them? I'm sure there's loads of other things that you can pick out and think of. But that for me was the gap. How do you make sure that families know what to expect? And I also think that is understandable, because no one could plan for the situation we're in. We've all responded the best that we can. So that's I think is my summary for the questionnaire feedback. Has anybody else got any questions about that? No, everybody happy? The second item that I just wanted to talk about was the alternative education provision framework. I sent out the link to the information which is currently on the school's information site, and that is being updated at the moment. So I've had quite a lot of feedback from the deputies, inclusion deputies group, and we're just reshaping the information. So by next week, you will see a lot more information, and it's going to be more based on frequently asked questions. But if I was to summarize, you know, what that was, the framework is about, first of all, capturing all of the different offers in the city, whether they are offers from schools or offers from tutors, offers from online providers, offers from non-registered providers. What the framework does is it asks non-registered providers to fill in a supplier questionnaire. The supplier questionnaire does two things. It gives you basic information about the business, and it also asks them to complete 4 method statements. And all this information is being expanded on the pod so you can see what they are, and there'll be a blank form as well. What it doesn't do is guarantee safety and quality of education. But what it does say to schools is it's okay for you to approach these particular providers. They've engaged. So phase 1 is that supplier questionnaire for non-registered providers. It's getting people to fill that in. It's judged by a panel. They then are on the list, so you know that you can approach them. The second phase is working with schools to say, well, how can we all work together across the system? You're out visiting these providers, you've got pupils there. How can we pull that information to feedback about what's working well, what's not working well, where the strengths are, where the challenges are in that system? And again, I think that will be part of the agenda at next week's Inclusion Deputies, but it's how we sort of feed that through as a group of SENCOs. I know some of you sit across both groups. I know Joe at Denport High School for Girls does, but I would just encourage you all to talk to the other member of your senior leadership team who taps into that group, just to see how the land lies and where they think they are, and then you can come back to us with any questions. Any questions on that particular item? No, everybody happy? Okay, so that's my 2 items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Welcome, Alison. Thank you. Just to let you know that we are recording this session because our numbers are quite low today. So SENCOs are obviously very busy people. So we thought a good thing to do would be to record it and then they can watch it at their convenience. So the third agenda item is around the TAMS and the EHAP paperwork. So would you like to raise that today, Alison? I know our numbers are quite low.
Yes. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Sorry I was late. I was finishing a training session with the trainees, which overran a little bit. Yeah, so it is a shame we've got a small numbers, but we can maybe, if it's being recorded and being sent out, then we can perhaps get feedback from people at a later date. So this is an issue that has been going on a while, I think. It's do people use the early help paperwork, or do they use the multi-agency support plan TAM paperwork, and what is that going to look like going forward? So I know there have sometimes been meetings where somebody from social care has come and has said to us, SENCO, I've been in a meeting such as this, where they've been told that they shouldn't be using the MAST paperwork, they should only be using the early help paperwork. There hasn't been that clear directive from SEND to date, but there are discussions about what needs to happen going forward. And in fact, Jim and Penny Whitell and I, and you as well, Lisa, I think, somebody else, are going to meet with some of the early help staff next week to sort of have that discussion and look at when, and so what we would really appreciate to have to take to that meeting is, what are your views and experiences about how you make it work, and what do you think helps, what are the advantages, disadvantages of each, I suppose, because I'm very aware that for some young people there are various sets of plans, and we've got Zoe here, so on top of that we've also got child protection plans, children in care plans, we've got child in need plans, so there are sometimes a whole set of different plans available to be used, and sometimes it's quite hard to work out, well, actually, how many places do I need to record this? So sort of over to you, really. What are your experiences, thoughts, and what's your practice currently, and does that work? Should we go around each in turn? Is that okay? Should we come to you first, Rachel?
Hi, Alison. Thank you for raising this. It's a really it's a current topic, I suppose, for our school. We use as a team a lot of the Team Around Me paperwork, because I find they're really good to capture that picture and that snapshot for a pupil, whilst almost as well making those outcomes-based plans. So that's what I tend to opt for generally for us as a team. But we have had training from the early help team on using the EHAT, but I personally find that paperwork quite hard to do, and it's quite time consuming, and sometimes the outcomes wouldn't necessarily be different from the TAM, if that makes sense. So we as a school at the moment, we're using the EHAT when there's maybe more complex issues around safeguarding and child protection alongside other issues. But I'd be interested to see what other people think personally, but I do find the EHAT paperwork quite tricky to manage when you've got time constraints on your time.
What do you find tricky about it? Because they have revised it. So I think that was launched at the SENCO conference just before the lockdown, wasn't it? So it is more streamlined than it was in terms of the early help assessment and the review paperwork. But I hear what you're saying still about that the actual assessment, and I think again people only have to do the bits that are relevant to a family. But actually, as you have those discussions, you find out quite a lot is relevant. Jim, you got something to add there? You're on mute, Jim.
Sorry, my clicker is slower than my button, and then you click it again and mute yourself again, and you're stuck in this terrible cycle. Yeah, I spoke to Martine yesterday prior to setting up our meeting, Alison, and it's my understanding that they are revising the format again to make it more user-friendly. So your feedback's really useful, and I think it's about how we sort of move that forward from the meeting and work out how we're going to do it. But yeah, my understanding is it's in a process of being constantly streamlined based on feedback.
Right, okay, because I would have said, so people probably haven't used it, well, I don't know how much they have used it since the March revision. Karen, shall we come to you?
I was just typing because I have to be in a classroom in 3 minutes, so I haven't got long. And there's the bell.
Oh, okay.
We only use the EHAT paperwork if we're trying to get something external in that isn't already in place. So, for example, a youth worker or FIP involvement. If we're not needing external support and we're just needing a framework of targets and family, EP and us can work that together, then we use the MAST paperwork for that, which is this sort of Team Around Me paperwork. So yeah, we'd only do an EHAT if we'd need to involve an agency that's not already involved to sort of draw that resource in. I think the streamlined paperwork was much better than the previous paperwork. So it used to take an hour to do an EHAT, and now it is a lot better, but it's still not as straightforward as you'd want it. So I'm glad to hear it's going forward again, but I am going to have to run because I'm going to have 30 children waiting for me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye. And what about you, Helen? I know you're new into this still, but it's interesting to have, first impressions of coming into it. How does it seem so far?
I'll be honest. Using what I've been advised, mainly by you to use. Happier using around me paperwork. That seems the one I've got my head around more. When I did this job last time, I did a couple of BHAT and found them incredibly time consuming, and back to the days when I had been CAF trained, it felt very similar, obviously, like that amount of paperwork. So I find the TAM paperwork usable and useful, but obviously it's still really early days for me.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And certainly, I'm mindful that you might have some perspectives on this as well, because children in need, they have their pets and their plans. But I'm interested in your perspective on this.
I guess it's probably if they're already subject to children's social care involvement, so they've kind of passed whatever level of threshold they're at, that they're already in the system. So we don't want schools to have to sort of start from the beginning again. So if there's existing paperwork and documentation, build on that rather than go right back to the beginning. So an EHAT's probably, as the schools have all said, not hugely useful if you've got other agencies already involved, but if you do want those agencies involved, that's where we use it. And for my children that are all the way past the threshold, the personal education plans are statutory, so we can just have those whenever we like. So there's no need to use any of that other documentation, because that is the vehicle for recording anything that's got a school-based concern. But there isn't any clarity around that.
Yeah. So I think where I come across it is, so there is there's a PEP and a child in care plan, but actually if that child has got quite considerable special educational needs, but not at a statutory level, so there's not, so in theory you could have well, you do. I've been in a meeting this morning with EHCP and a child in care, so a PEP system as well. And obviously you have to have those two sets of plans, but when they're in an EHCP level, then do you find that schools are using the multi-agency support plan to focus more deeply on the special educational needs side of it?
Yes, quite frequently that is the case. It's usually because we've reached a point where we are at the asking question stage. Who can help us? What do we need to do next? It's not so much we need to be making a referral to X, Y, or Z. It's a multi-agency discussion about what our next step's going to look like, and that's where that multi-agency plan is brilliant, because it does pull in all the professionals and draws up actions for everybody.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I saw Zoe Baring drop in just now. She seems to have dropped straight out again, which is a shame, because I know she was one of the people that raised it, I think, in the last of these meetings. Jim, oh, she is. Let's see if she can stay in this time. Submitting. Hi Zoe.
Hello.
Welcome.
Been on
That's very good timing, because I'll tell you where we're up to. We were having a discussion, which I know you raised at the last meeting, around what paperwork do I use. So yes, so there's also been, and I didn't say this to everybody else, but Jim and I also, when we were at the meeting with the inclusion deputies, it was actually also raised there about, should we be using early help paperwork, should we be using the multi-agency support plan, and we said we would take away from that, talk to Penny Patel, who's also, I can see, joined us just to sort of listen in to views, because she and Jim and I are going to be meeting with Martina Aquilina next week to sort of get a little bit more clarity and just to explore the issues together. So you've come back in from Devon. Where are you up to with your thinking and your experience about it so far? Because I know you knew the Plymouth system beforehand.
I mean,
what issues would you like?
I think that I guess coming back into Plymouth, I had members of staff in school sort of saying, oh, this student needs a TAM, and then they were looking for that kind of like framework, that paperwork around it, but I almost kind of felt they didn't really know what the TAM was going to do or what was going to happen as a result of that TAM, and certainly from having discussions with you and Jim, I think it helped rationalise for me that really, regardless of a framework or a pro forma, you're looking at out focused support or a plan around a young person that you can then you know, monitor and review effectively. So for some young people that might well be, you know, in my school that might be a My Plan or a SEND support plan, you know, but for other young people, I guess maybe when you're looking more globally or you're looking to involve other agencies, that might be when you would utilise the TAM. I mean, we have class charts and provision maps, so I have now set up my own kind of TAM template within the system so that I can have like a review protocol around it, and that was going off the old one that was you know, established I think in about 2015, so before I left the city. And I do think it is really useful, but I guess I don't really know if people had clarity between what was a SEND plan, what a TAM framework might be used for, and also you know, where EHAT might sit alongside that as well. And so it's I guess picking your tool, isn't it? And maybe where you are seeking clarity for other people, making sure that's a shared understanding rather than just like within an institution a focus on what they would use for different outcomes specifically.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I think these are the issues, and it just does need that sort of strategic sitting down to make some, you know, I think it needs personally, I think it needs mapping out, you know, some sort of visual chart as to how it would look and when you might go for what or the other. I think that's probably the helpful thing to look at. But yes, we can take that away. Anybody else want to respond to anything somebody else has said?
Sorry, it's Rachel from All Saints. I'd just like to say that I do find that other professionals will often say to a family, the school need to run an EHAT, and this comes up quite a lot, whereas when you sit and speak with the family, we might then end up running a TAM. So I do think it needs some clarification, because I get lots of different professionals telling families that an EHAT specifically needs to be run. So it'd be good to have clarification across the board, I suppose, for us.
Yeah, I can respond to that, because when we somebody mentioned earlier, it was about the CAF, and I was involved in delivering the CAF training, and that's a long-standing issue for schools, isn't it? That actually, because they're the universal provider, everybody seems to think that they are the only people who should be doing it. So I've come across quite a few times where CAMs have written to a post-16 provider or a school and said, you know, this an EHAT needs to happen, whereas in theory the people with the concern should, you know, could be starting that process. But I don't think everybody's commissioned to do that. When with services that have a clearer commission like health, if that's not in their commission, in their job description, they don't do it. So I think there is that issue still that needs to be acknowledged, definitely, and probably discussed further. Jim, did you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think there's anything I've heard today which, you know, it's the same set of issues which I think we were trying to move forward just before lockdown happened in March. And I think it's interesting, obviously children not at school, this issue's has sort of died down slightly, but now everyone's back. It's really no surprise to me that people are sort of seeking those levels of clarity, but I am confident we can do it. And I'm confident that when we meet next week, we'll be able to move forward and respond to the points that you've raised, because I recognise them all.
Yes, that's really helpful. Penny, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I was really going to say the same as Jim. I think this is really helpful to have this conversation prior to our meeting next week. I know that just before lockdown, Martine Aquilina came to some of the SENCO briefings, and like Jim said, we were starting to move forward. I think the idea of the EHAT is a really good one. I think the fact that it's in a generic place, that it's on a portal that then will link in with EHC requests, I think that is a really good idea. But however, I do recognise from an education perspective, the multi-agency support plan may be more useful. So I think taking back all of these comments will be really useful. But I think having a sort of process map of where everything fits would be really helpful. So yeah, we'll definitely take this forward.
Yeah, brilliant.
From my perspective as well, just listening to what the secondary SENCOs are saying today is quite interesting, because listening to what the primaries say, it's almost a different story. They're starting to use the EHAT paperwork more because they're finding the maths paperwork is quite clunky, and they find it's quite difficult to navigate and it's not very user friendly. So that's quite interesting actually to find that you know that's split between perhaps primary and secondary using different things. So there's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. Yes, definitely. So thank you for the feedback, folks.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll just build on that because I'm finding that having now picking up primaries again, actually they do tend to be using the EHAT, but I will say from what I've seen so far, the depth in that is not the quality of depth that I would normally see in a multi-agency support plan. So I think, you know, because I think that so that we need to look at actually, yes, it might be easier, but actually if you don't get the depth in terms of the interventions and actually who's going to do exactly what, then you don't necessarily, and I think some of the language that I've found is still much more about targets and not outcomes, and I think that we've got to make that clearer for people. I've heard a lot of target vocabulary rather than outcomes, and they are slightly different things, and what we really want to be working on is outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I do think if we could take all of these recommendations and still have something that is useful for everyone in one place so that it sits in the portal, I think that would be the ideal, you know, so that we haven't got the EHAT on the portal and then we got multi-agency support plans somewhere else. I think it would be good to have it in one place, but I think
we've got the SENCO guide, so you know we can use that as the key sort of hub for the information, really.
But at the moment, I think we've got some people using the EHAT on the portal, some people using multi-agency support plans, some people using the old versions of things. So we've got a bit of a mishmash of things going on. So to get a little bit more unity would be really helpful. And then, like you're saying, making sure that everyone knows where to find it as well. That would be good.
What to do with it, because I think some people have regularly and have long-term sent in their multi-agency support plans to Gateway, and other people don't, and other people actually do EHAT and they just do it on the paperwork and it doesn't even go near the portal.
Yeah. Say, as someone who is obviously very new to this, I would really appreciate the clarity, because I have staff here who are often asking me, oh, you need to do this and this, and I'm really pleased to see other people I haven't got the level of clarity on it, because I thought it was just me being new. So if it was something that was very clearly set out as in some kind of a flow diagram, I think that'd be really useful, certainly to me anyway.
Good. Hopefully we will achieve that. So I think we've got some clear on to what we need to achieve from this meeting. Welcome, Ian. We're just finishing off on an item on the EHAT and multi-agency support plan, usability of them, to take on to a meeting next week. I don't know whether you're coming in late to this, whether you've got any immediate comments on that. And you're on mute.
Yeah, I'd hesitate to chip in too much at the moment because I've not heard the rest of the conversation. I'm afraid I had trouble getting in. Only to say that I assume this discussion's been about making the EHA portal easier to use and to read the output from.
Well, certainly one of the facts. Good. Okay, so I think we've finished the item then. Oh, Helen, is your hand up or is it a legacy hand?
I think it might be an ode hand. Is that an ode hand, Helen? Yes. Lovely, thank you. That's all right. Just to make everyone aware that's come into the meeting a little bit late, we are recording the session because at the start of the session we only had a couple of SENCOs that were in the meeting, so we thought the best thing to do is record it so that all of the SENCOs can hear this at a later date. So we have covered all of the agenda items this morning. So I'm sorry, Ian, you've just joined us and we've covered everything. So we're getting to any other business now, and you've joined us. So we will go around and do any other business. So we will start with Rachel. Do you have any other business this morning?
No, not from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Zoe?
Just say that a training program's gone out to all your designated teachers of what we're offering this year. It's all going to be online, but if you wanted to have a look at that, some of it will be transferable and relevant to you guys as well.
Lovely, thank you. Helen?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Wonderful. Zoe B?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Ian?
Nothing from me, thanks.
And Alison?
No, nothing else. Thank you very much.
Jim?
Nothing from me.
Is that everybody? I think a couple of people did leave, didn't they? Yes, I think that's it. There's nothing else from me. So I think that is it then, everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining in. And we will send this recorded session out to all of you. So if you did miss the first part of the session, you can hear Jim's messages as well. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks then. I'll stop recording now. Thank you. Bye.